Hello.
Hi.
Openness, transparency versus secrecy. And this is a very, very big fader because it can be applied to everything. And not just thing within the game or how players see themselves, but also in the organization of LARP itself. So it's a bit complicated. So, of course, no input. Of course.
I think it's just the cable is a bit loose on the side.
This one is in really hard and screwed in. So. Oh, it's back. So everything is of course accessible. Characters, plots, theme, budget, agenda, location, organizing, players, narrative, everything. Everything is put out there, so you can download all characters, you know, all budgets, you know who's organizing, you know where you want to go to, you know all players and all their names and where they live and basically everything. And at the other end, of course, there's total secrecy. Nothing is accessible, so you don't know who's organizing, who's playing, where it is, when it is, the budget, and so on. So this slider is also when it turns to max and to minimum, it gets a little bit weird. But the important thing about the slider is that it forces you to ask questions. The question could be, what consequences are there if I use a slider? For example, if you play or you do an investigation lab where people need to figure out who murdered the count, if everybody knows all characters and know who did it, then the lab will not be about that. It would be about the journey to figuring that out. But if nobody knows who did it, then it's going to be about who did it. And that changes a lot of the theme and the feel and how you're going to play. The most important question when you use this fader is, of course, what are you trying to achieve? Do you want investigatory lab or do you want emotional lab, for example, in the thing I said? And why are you trying to achieve this? And this question, I think, is the most important when whatever you're doing, that you need to ask yourself why. Are we doing this just because it's fun, which is perfectly fine? Or do you want to convey or deliver a message, or do you have an agenda and so on? And of course, is this the best way to do it? Are there other faders that are better to adjust, or do you change your story or the characters and so on to make this more effective? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to run through a few of the things on the list, these things, and I'm just going to very shortly pinpoint obvious consequences of using openness or secrecy, transparency or secrecy on specifics. And at the end, I'm also, during these things, I'm going to show some examples of labs that have done it differently, more open or not. And at the end, I'm going to do, there's a list of things that doesn't really need examples, but they should be mentioned anyways. So the narrative or story or theme, which is sort of in the same vicinity. Narrative is how you get to the end. The story is what you were trying to show, and the theme is, of course, it could be genre, it could be a feel that you want to portray. If you have a lot of transparency, then you'll get collaboration and direction. So if everybody knows this is a ghost lab, then everybody will try to play in that theme. And if you're trying to conceal a lot of information about the narrative or the story, then you will get investigation and wonder, because then you will realize, or it will be revealed to you, the theme or the story or the narrative, and that will create sensation. A couple of examples of Delirium. They had sort of a mix. They had the story and theme was very clear and displayed, but the narrative was completely concealed from the players. So everybody knew this was about an insane asylum. They knew that the theme was about experiencing insanity and relationships and love, but how you get to that point, the players were not told. And in the other end, you had The White Road, which Johanna also talked about briefly, a game of mine which was co-created by all of the players. So everybody made everybody's character, and they did the budget together, and they did everything together. And the story was planned beforehand. We need to go from here to there, and there will be a funeral at the end, and so on. So everybody knew what was going to happen, so everybody focused on that specific story. And that's very easy to do if this is transparent. Are you following me? Or good. The next one is characters. You can, of course, do various things with the characters. If you do transparency, again, you have easy access. If everybody knows all characters, then it's easier to sort of pinpoint and sort of aim for where the soft spot is on that character. So if you play personal drama and you know somebody has cheated on his wife, you can sort of insinuate or move the play in that direction. And that's very difficult to do if of course you do not know that, but that again creates surprise because, oh, he cheated on his wife. So again, it depends on what you want to do. Is the interesting part not sort of the reveal, or is it the interesting part that everybody knows this and there's a journey for it? Two games, At Just a Little Oven, which was a game about the AIDS crisis in the 80s. When I got my character, all the relations I had to other characters, I got their character as well. So I had their full character and I could read what they knew about me and how they felt about me. And that gave me, and the other players of course, a lot of options on where to place your interaction with those characters. So if you do not know, normally when you get a character, you get the character and then you know this guy and you feel about him this and this way. And that's what you have. In the other end, with the other character, something completely different could be written down. And if those things do not hook up very smoothly, then it becomes complicated. But if you can read everything, then you can sort of work on it. Secrecy creates surprises again. In a game I did called Level 5, none of the characters knew each other when they entered the room. It was about self-help movement, where you together sort of workshop your way to improving yourself. So nobody in the room knew each other from the beginning, so there was no need for anybody to know anything about the other characters beforehand. And that, of course, creates exploration through the characters. A very easy trick you can apply, which has been used for many years, is what is called the toilet wall. And that is that, of course, during a multi-day lab, everybody needs to go to the toilet, and when you go to the toilet, you just sit there. But on the wall of the toilet, there's all the characters or information about all the groups and so on. So you can sit there and read up, oh, this character seems very interesting. I want to find that person and play with them because they have sort of the same themes as I do. So that way you can sort of pick and choose on information. And there's, of course, also a middle ground where you give information to somebody and not to somebody else. But I'll come to that. Plots. Plot is when it is often used in games where you try to achieve intrigue, where you try to make sure that people are playing in groups against each other or persons against each other. And I've been thinking a lot about this because in my early LARP creating days I did a vampire campaign, and that's all about plotting. It's all about plotting against each other. And I thought about this Fader and about complete transparency in a game like that, and I simply couldn't make it work. So I thought transparency means stupidity, because it doesn't make any sense. But then I realized that was probably not right, because it's more like advantage. Because I realized in that game, we gave some of the players information about everybody. So they were sort of the information brokers of the game. So they had an advantage in that field. So that's a way to do it. So we give some players a lot of information about everything. Even things that pop up during play that the players do themselves, and then you collect that information and then you put it and relay it to this group, and they can use it whatever they want to do it. Also in this campaign we had a thing that you can do whatever you want, just tell us, the organizers, when it's running. Because you had like 150 players and they could, do anything. We're going to assassinate this person and so on. And this is a great way of controlling players and also giving them freedom. Because if you know what's going to happen, then you can give information and stop things you do not want to happen without the players feeling that they are being limited in their actions. So if somebody comes up to the organizers and say, I want to assassinate the person, and we say, fine, go do it. It's perfect. Do whatever you please. And then when they leave, you pick up the telephone, and then you call somebody in the other organization and said, hitmen are on the way. And then they can prepare, and then of course consequences of the actions. But then you can sort of control what is going to happen without the players feeling constricted. Yes?
You're talking now about giving information to players, but often you want some kind of in-game rationale, like maybe one of the vampires is a telepath and can read everybody's minds or something like that.
Yes, you can always do it like that you put in a filter that takes the sort of off-game knowledge and transfer it into in-game knowledge. It could be telepath, it could be information system or bugs, so whatever you have done to get this information. You have a question, Monica?
I'm not sure if I know what you mean with bots. If transparency, when there's transparency, and everybody knows it, I just don't know how it...
Exactly.
I just don't see why it's only, I have a hard time with the word.
It's, if you do labs that is...
Is it implied in the way you use the word plot that it's a secret?
No, it's not implied in the word, but if you remove the layer between the player and the character in this field, then it becomes complicated to control where information is going. For the player, for the character, and for the organizer. This is complicated. I'm not sure I understand it myself, this part. Yes. Any more comments, Monica? Or no? Let's move on, because this is not really working.
Do you have battery for this?
No.
Because you plugged it into the lights, that's why they're blinking.
Okay.
I want to plug it in the other. So will it go off?
Yes.
At once?
Yes.
Shit. Okay. Then I'll put like this, and I'll put this.
You're very right.
Yes.
Let's continue.
Yes. Setting. When you build a setting or a location, you can do it in many ways. Let's move to this one. The two examples is, of course, the game you just played. If you have a tape lab and everything is available to you, you get a lot of coherency because you can follow whatever is happening. An example is that I played a game set in a medieval setting, and we had a 3-story medieval building made out of wood. So the floors were so thin that whatever they were talking about on the 3rd floor, you could hear at the bottom floor. So when the lord and lady of the house had an argument, everybody in the staff could hear what they were saying. And this way, you get a lot of information. Of course, you can play on that. Either you can, as a player, play on it, or as a character, you can play on that. And that, again, is something that you can design for as an organizer, if you want this to happen. It's very easy. In the game you just played, of course, also the game master can stop the game and focus on a specific scene while everybody else freezes, and so on. And that also, again, creates even more transparency towards that scene, and it's also a way of guiding the information. Secrecy creates privacy, and that can be used really effectively. In System Denmark 2, they built a big city, or in a square in Copenhagen, they built a city for 350 people out of containers and so on, so you could hide, and you could talk in secret, and you can run away from somebody. And that, again, creates some specific motifs that you can choose to work with. Both of them are really good. It depends on what you want to do. Agenda. If you have an agenda in a lab, you can choose to tell it beforehand, or you can choose not to tell it, of course. If you tell it, then it creates motivation to understand this agenda. For example, in Delirium, the agenda was for everybody to experience love and insanity, And if you as a player know this, then you can move in that direction and focus on that. If you have a secret agenda in the game, then you manipulate your players. And this is both good and bad. It depends on how you use it, of course. In, again, System Denmark, they had an agenda to make all the players understand that the society in Denmark is not as carefree and green and beautiful as we think. There are a lot of homeless people and drug addicts and people living on the street, and they are abandoned by the system. But they did not tell the players about this. They made a LARP that was sort of a Hollywood-esque future world where everybody was C citizens and not A citizens. And then you played that for 2 days and everybody was happy and drinking and having fun. And then they took all of the players, all 350 players after the game had ended, and took them into a big hall. And then they showed them a 10-minute documentary about people living on the streets that was specifically aimed for the players to change their mind on this issue. And a lot of players thought that was really unethical, and some really loved it. But you have to be prepared to take that fight if you choose to have a secret agenda. And the secret agenda can be really, really good, of course. And it can also be that you want the society around you not to realize what you are trying to do. So there's a lot of different ways to do it. And it can be used very much for good. And an important thing as an organizer is that players are extremely helpful. They really want to do what you say. So if you use transparency in your agenda, then they will try to achieve that for you, because they want to help. Yes. Then I have sort of a list of stuff that also can be put on the fader from transparency to secrecy. Location where you're going to play. I think the 1943 game in Belarus, the players did not know where the game was held. Is that true? Or did I have wrong information?
What do you mean they didn't know?
They didn't know where they were going to play the game.
No.
Yeah.
They saw some pictures, but they didn't know exactly.
The exact location, yes. You can keep the players secret. There was a series of games in Denmark called 700%, where you ask the player if they want to come and play, and then you had a lot of sort of people around them to assist that player's story, and you were never told who else was in the game before it started. And this was also to sort of create a feeling of what's going to happen, and I don't know who's going to be here and so on, so you couldn't prepare in the same way. Organizers, you can of course list them on your webpage, or you cannot. Or you can choose not to. There's a Danish organization that never lists who runs or organizes the game, because they feel that the organization as a whole lifts this assignment and nobody should be put in the spotlight, because it's sort of a common thing that they do together. So that can also be put on fader. The budget, I know many organizers in Denmark put their budget online on their website, so people can see what they get for their money, and some choose not to because they want to have the freedom to put money where they want it to be. So again, you can do that. PR, you can choose to sort of be secret about it to create hype, or you can just put everything out there. And community, and this is sort of a tricky one. I got this from Erland because he played a game in Stockholm, and he came there and it was sort of run in the city. And then everybody went to this place where LARPers go, and they didn't tell the Norwegian players, but all the Swedes, of course, knew that this was the place that they're going to go, so they were running around in the city not knowing where to go. Also, all communities have specific things that they do that nobody else knows about, because it's sort of just in the culture. And you need to be very careful and focused if you invite players from other cultures of gaming, that you tell them how to play. I went to the United States and played, and that was, of course, complicated because they have a completely different culture. A great example was I did a game 5-6 years ago in the Netherlands, and I thought they were like us when in the way they played. And we made a game, and then we had to run it 5 times, and the first game was a complete disaster. The players went home after like a day because they thought it was completely stupid. In the Netherlands, apparently, they never play player versus player gaming, only player versus environment, because they have a consensus culture that every time there's a problem, they sit down, debate it, and find a solution that everybody can agree upon, and then they move on. And if you create, as I did, or we did, the organizers created a game that tried to make people play against each other or make conflict in between players, then it completely collapses. And we had no way of knowing this because we didn't know which questions to ask. The next game we sort of changed like 5% of the design, and then it worked perfectly suddenly. Because you just know, if you do not know which part of the culture is different from yours, then you don't know what to decide for. And it can break everything if you do not know the right things. So, should I make X more transparent or secret? Ask this question about every aspect of your organizing. And of course ask what are the consequences of doing this, and will this make my lab better? And this is really interesting because I realized when I started doing labs with an American artist, and he questioned me about everything, things that I thought was just the way we did it, and then I had to explain why I did it this way, and suddenly realized I did not know why. And if you do not know why you're doing stuff, then you need to think about why you do stuff. And this is a very important thing. So, thank you. Questions? Johanna.
It's not a question, it's a comment. Can I stand up and give it?
Yes.
Yes. I'll just turn around so people can hear me. One aspect of this addition about the keeping players secret, for instance, or other things, is sometimes you can use secrets to make the world of the game bigger. So I was talking about the 360-degree game Carolus Rex before, the retro-futuristic space adventure. One thing that they did there, this was a Swedish game for Swedish players, where the Swedish space army was fighting the Danish space army. And it was like 36 hours. After about 12 hours of the game, the spaceship made contact through the computer with like an escape pod from a Danish spaceship. And then the computer said that because of international space law, we have to dock with this in case there are refugees on board. Of course, we knew there wouldn't be refugees on board. Probably going to be like a monster. The players thought it's probably going to be a monster or some disease or something. So we didn't want to open the hatch, but we did it anyway. And in came like 6 Danish LARPers speaking Danish in Danish space uniforms that they had completely kept hidden from the Swedish players. And then, of course, this secret made, because then it's like anything can happen. The world outside the spaceship does never end. Everything is there. If they say that there are other people there, there might be other people there. So keeping secrets can actually create an amazing sense of wonder as well.
Yes. Monica.
If I can just add to that one, I tried to be one of the Danish people entering, and people didn't believe that we were Danish. Like, it took them 5 minutes, but they were very like, oh, it's actually Danish. Because we were 15 hours into Sweden, we were really far away from Denmark.
Okay.
Can I just make the shortest?
Shortest of the short.
So, in total retrospect, I see the big problem with giving the big, like, secret surprises. You do a big fantasy village game, and then there is a surprise attack by orcs in the night, and everyone just only thinks that this will be just a cozy village LARP, that this will be only about sitting and eating and having fun and dancing. And then the organizers think this will be a great idea that we have terror and horror on this game. And it could work, but sometimes that stuff has turned out to be a catastrophe when you have this enormous big secret. So maybe the Carolus Rex thing would have turned out really bad. Now it didn't, because it was thought through. That's just like on the top other of the scale, when the big secret is actually killing game. So
changing the genre is a stupid secret.
Yes.
That's been proved over and over again.
Yes, that's complete, because people play in a
Can you just
specific...
repeat that back?
Yes. There was a Danish game called Bolværk. It was it was a simulation of horrors of war in the early Middle Ages. 2/3 through the game, monsters arrived, like 50 in masks. And then the style changed to horror and terror. And when players are playing simulation and then have to change to terror, they're not agreeing upon what they're going to play. Because if you play horror, you go into the basement alone. If you play simulation, you do not go into the basement alone. And that creates a lot of problems. So, thank you.
Johanna, can we ask you also on the stage?
Yes.
You know, while I was standing here on the stage, I was thinking about two things. The first thing, what I've noticed about LARPers, knowing them for a long time, is they can talk endlessly about LARPs. And,
Yes.
and the second thing that I thought about, actually LARPs are very often not only about playing them, but also about sharing your experience after you play them. And so I really would like to thank Bjarke and Johanna for wonderful presentations that they made, because I think it's a really a gift to be able to speak about your experience in a way that you can give this experience to the others and inspire them with that. So unfortunately they are leaving today, and that's why we want to... Yes. But we want to thank you and give you two small presents that hope will... I don't know, you can use them creatively. Yes.
You will also, in addition to this, you will also get your own copy of this Love Writer Summer School t-shirt. It looks like this. And you will all get one of these. They are available in the lobby, but don't leave because we have more information.
I would just like to say, oh, now I'm gonna cry. This is awful. We should thank you, and of course, especially the organizers. This is so fantastic. And you know, like when we started going to games a very long time ago, when some of you were not even born, literally. It was just an amazing thing to do, but we never, ever, ever, I mean, of course, it becomes a little bit religious, as somebody said today. And you want to tell everybody what a fantastic hobby you have, and what a fantastic art form and medium and communication form you have found. But the only other people you can really tell it to are other LARPers, and we could never imagine that something like this could happen. No. And that educational gaming could get such a place and such a future as it has today, everywhere in the world, in countries that didn't even exist when some, well, hardly existed when some of us started LARPing, almost not. It's absolutely astonishing. And I was looking at you guys going out to play today, and I was standing there, like my tears were actually running a little. I'm a crier, I am. Because I felt so happy and so proud and so grateful to be here, and it's such a shame that we can stay and hear all the fantastic talks and have a wonderful time.
Yes. And, two things. We were sitting in the cabin yesterday with some of the other speakers, and I suddenly realized somebody has asked me to go to another country to talk about the thing I love the most. And that's pretty damn awesome. I'm very happy about that. Second one, make games, make mistakes, make more games, make more mistakes, make more games.
And then let's